Hello, N4HNH here. Well, today's video is going to be somewhat somber, sad. We're saying goodbye to an old friend, the Yaesu FT DX3000. I never owned one, but I seriously considered one before I bought my FTdx5000. It's a fine radio, that 3000. Wow. And Yaesu announced last week that they will discontinue manufacturing this radio, and I actually had a conversation this morning with the marketing manager, and apparently it's a supply chain issue, the availability of some of the key components. And well, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but they've had some there's a factory that has burned to the ground in Japan that was making some of the components primarily for Kenwood and ICOM. In fact, the Kenwood THD74 HT is also going to be discontinued, and apparently, from what I've read, it has to do with that same factory in Japan. I don't know if that's the case here with the the marketing manager didn't say that the parts for this radio comes from that factory. He just said there are some supply chain issues, and they don't like to continue making a radio if they don't feel like they can support it for 5 years. So the way I understood it was they want to be sure that not only can they get enough parts to build a radio, but if they were to stop building it, they would have enough parts to support repairs for 5 years. So apparently they don't feel confident that they will be able to maintain support for the 3000. So I spoke with HRO this morning, and they have 17 of these in stock nationwide. So if any of you were considering getting a radio in this class, I would highly recommend jumping on the chance, and which is going to lead to part of what this video is going to be about, but I just wanted to make that announcement. Now, it was also announced by someone in the past week that the FTdx5000 was also being discontinued. My pal here. But according to Yaesu's marketing manager this morning, he said so far so good with this one as far as the supply chain, but they are keeping an eye on the situation. You know, COVID has caused some hardships, and then sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, some key component. I remember some years ago, one of the things they mentioned that might cause the demise of the FT857D was the availability of the VFO knob. But somehow it still hung in there for a few more years. Sad though, because, and I get on Yaesu a little bit about this. They will discontinue a product without having anything comparable to put in its place. You know, for example, the FT270R, which is one of my favorite handy talkies of all time. Waterproof, mil-spec. I like that the microphone screws in at the top, so I can put it in a case, and you know, it's no problem to get a mic plugged into it. Has a tremendous receiver on it. It's a single band, you know, and that's what I wanted. You know, I hike these mountains for summits on the air, and a lot of times we're around towers. We have one here in Atlanta, Stone Mountain, and there's a 50,000 watt broadcast transmitter up there. Most radios you go up there with can't hear, even other Yaesus. Not the FT60, I'll say. It works pretty well up there, and that's one I hope they don't discontinue anytime soon as well. But the radios that are SDR based or direct conversion, even the Yaesu FT65, of course a Baofeng, they're stone cold deaf up there. They're deaf as a post. But the FT270, I can stand up there under the tower and with 5 watts, and I can have a QSO with somebody 60 miles away. I've done it. But it got discontinued and no replacement. So nothing in that, you know, $150 price range. And now you might wonder, Doug, why would you want them to hold on to older technology? Because it was single band, super heterodyne, a dual super heterodyne. Well, see, this is what I want to talk to you about. We got to be careful what we buy. Because what we buy is signaling the manufacturers what we're willing to pay for, therefore what they're going to make. And sorry, I sipped some coffee. The issue is, so the introduction of the SDR, software-defined radio. Well, that's the new buzzword, right? It's got to be great. It's the newest technology. The truth of that is, I'm just going to be straight with you guys. It's cheaper to make a radio using a software-defined radio because it's on a chip. It's cheaper to make the radio. As a matter of fact, the size of the radios could be smaller than they are. They've got to fit a screen, a few knobs on there. That does not necessarily make it better. As a matter of fact, it gives them maybe a better margin on the manufacturing side, unless they're willing to invest in the proper filtering in the front end of that software-defined radio, so that it can compete with a super heterodyne. So don't get the idea that, software-defined, it must be better than super heterodyne. That's not necessarily the case. Now, credit where credit's due. Flex has done software-defined radio right. They put the proper filtering in there. But look what you pay for a Flex. When the 7300 came out, and a friend of mine had one, and we were noticing the front end overload issues and terrible selectivity, and I said, well, what needs to happen? Well, let me explain why that is. Okay, so when you're directly sampling off the air, you're dragging in everything out there. You know that your antenna is capable, all the magnetic waves your antenna is capable of trapping. DC to daylight, okay? I mean, it's like, this brings up another point. You look at the specs of an HT, for example, and it'll say, wow, it can hear AM broadcast, it can hear FM broadcast, it can hear aircraft, it can hear 900 megahertz. And oh, by the way, it happens to also work on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. So you read a spec, and they know this about us, the manufacturers, the marketing people. You read that spec and you go, wow, that thing must be incredible. No, we got to be shrewd. We got to know what we're looking at there. When a radio has a front end that's open to that many different frequency ranges, it's got a front end that's going to drag in all these things you don't want to hear, and it will serve to work against the selectivity aspects of your radio. Selectivity meaning the radio's ability to hear what you want to hear and reject the signals you don't want to hear. So see, to me, two very important things about a radio receiver are selectivity and noise floor, signal-to-noise ratio, which is why I chose the radio you're looking at. If you know my story, I think I've shared it in maybe a video or two, but, I went into ham radio outlet in January of 2019, having saved up to buy a Kenwood TS990S, my dream rig. And before I walked out, I looked over and I saw an FTdx3000 sitting there, and I thought, I guess it'd be prudent to at least give that radio a listen. I picked out this CW signal. There was an S6 noise floor down there. It's a terrible location, industrial park area there our ham radio outlet is located in. So it was not a good situation, but then again, that will separate the men from the boys when it comes to receivers. So I got this CW station with an S6 noise level. I got him dialed in. He was S7, and I got him as quiet as I could, masking out the noise. And it was okay. I'm like, that's a good radio. So I go over to the 5000, turn them to the same frequency, flip over to the same antenna, and the noise floor immediately, I noticed it was only like an S1 or an S2 maybe, and I thought, well, this radio can't hear. And so I looked to see if attenuation was on, right here, and there was no attenuator, and I thought, well, maybe IPO's on. No, it was on amp 1. So, what's wrong? And then that CW station started sending again, and he was S7. But he was S7 with a lower noise floor. So I thought, Doug, you better not make such a quick decision here. That turned into 8 months of me going down to HRO 3 hours at a time, sitting there and switching the same antenna to all the different radios. And sideband CW, putting them through the paces, and I kept coming back to the 5000. I even waited on the FTdx101 to arrive, and I put it up against the 5000. And well, the audio to my ears, how this radio sounds with this SM5000 speaker up here, which happens to have a spectrum scope. And to be honest with you, I don't care about scopes, but it happens to be in there. It just sounds amazing. It doesn't sound digital, and I say that because some of the radios, the digital is just, man. I mean, I don't know if you saw the shootout I just did recently with the 7300. It's a good radio, but then when you put it right up there next to even an 891 or a 991, I mean, I had stations on that 7300. I could tell they were there, but the 7300's DSP could not separate the noise from the signal. And then I switched over to the little $600 FT891 or even the $1,150 FT991A, and I could tell what the person was saying. So let's not get caught up in newest technology must be better. It's better for the manufacturers because they can build the radio cheaper. Again, if they want to do SDR right, they've got to put some proper filtering in the front end. So back to I was playing with my friend's 7300, and I was saying to him, somebody needs to come out with a SDR. I get it, it's a good idea, but somebody needs to come out with one where you've got a traditional front end that can filter the signals down to what I want to hear, the band I want to hear. I don't want to hear DC to daylight coming in my receiver, and then I gotta sort through all that. The radio's got to deal with all that extra coming into the front end of it, and I'm just wanting to hear the ham band, right? So, excuse me, another sip of coffee. I told him, I was saying, to my friend, I think I even told my brother this. Somebody needs to come up with a radio that's got a traditional front end and then hand off over to the digital world. And within a year or so, I saw the block diagram for the Yaesu FTdx101, and I was amazed. There it is, the hybrid. You got the best of both worlds. And the 101 is a fine radio, don't get me wrong. But I still prefer a super heterodyne. I believe the radio you're looking at right there, the FTdx5000 MP. In all of my years, I've been involved with radio since I was 14, and I guess I'll just tell you I'm pushing 60. I've worked on them for a living. Focused primarily on HTs when I was younger, the Motorola HTs. But I want to tell you, I think this radio that you're looking at is the pinnacle of radio design. In fact, the manager at our HRO, when I was in there doing all that testing, he walked by me one day. He's a funny fella, and he says, "Man, you haven't picked a radio yet?" "No, I haven't, Mark." He said, "Well, come on, man. There's not a whole lot more they can do with radios now. Look, they're putting fancy screens on them now because they got to come up with something new. The receivers are all good." He's right. They are all good. But I still think, for example, for my style, okay, if you're a rag chewer and you just get on 75 meters at night and you've all got amps and your friends and you guys are 30 and 40 over and you're just having a chit-chat, man, any radio out there will do. It really will. I like the challenge of chasing QRP stations, sideband and CW. And a good many of them are out of the country, and also Oregon, Washington State, all the way on the other side of the country from me. Me being, in Metro Atlanta. I love the challenge of pulling those stations out, and I've never even owned a tower. Okay, I don't have a beam. I've got, if you've seen my past videos, I use dipoles. I've got one vertical, and then I've got a doublet, all center fed dipole, and then a ZS6 BKW, which is funny. I get so many compliments on 40 meters on my signal, and people want to know what I'm running, and I'm always happy to tell them it's a ZS6. I'll tell them it's a G5RV just for fun, because it's, side note here, but it's just a computer optimized model that takes the G5RV as loosely as a grandfather, but it doesn't require a tuner on 4.5 bands. So yeah, I don't have a sophisticated antenna array, and this radio that you're looking at is able to pull out those 4 and 5 watt QRP stations in Washington State and Oregon amid the noise floor. I mean, and it's because of the DSP, and that's what I mean when I say I believe this is the pinnacle of radio design, where you've coupled a tremendous super heterodyne technology with I'll pan over there. Super heterodyne plus DSP. This is for receiver A, receiver B, or VFO-A, VFO-B. And because this radio does simultaneously, or can if I want it to, I hit a button here and I can simultaneously monitor 14062 while also monitoring 7.032. So I think super heterodyne technology plus DSP, and this is just about as good a radio as I've ever sat in front of. I put it in a class of maybe 3 more radios. So I don't want us to get snookered by marketing speak where we think, oh, SDR technology, it must be the best. And I'll give you this anecdote. Just bear with me here. I was walking into HRO during one of my trips to choose a radio. And just walking in the door, this guy struck up a conversation with me, and he said he was from Brazil. And he was there to pick up a 7300. I said, oh, really? He goes, yes. I said, well, have you considered the FT991A? Because you'll get 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Oh, no, SDR, latest technology. So we got in the store, and long story short, we wound up kind of doing a shootout. We'd find a weak station. He'd dial him in on the 7300 and get him as good as he could, and then he'd switch over to me, and I'd do it on a 991A. And I remember we had this, it got to the point where everybody in HRO, the sales guys, and including the manager, were over there trying to work that 7300 to make it out here, that Yaesu. And it couldn't be done. I had a week's sideband station using IPO, RF gain, and digital noise reduction on the 991A. I had this weak sideband station sound almost as good as if he was on a repeater. And if you've watched my video from the shootouts I did over the past 3 weeks, you'll see some examples of that. So don't get caught up in this terminology of SDR is the latest technology and therefore it may be great. We're playing right into the hands of the manufacturers who can then get away with producing radios because, again, if they're making them cheap, they're not putting proper filtering in them, okay? And without the proper filtering, the SDR is going to be hamstrung. That's a pun, isn't it? But anyway, we just got to be careful about that. But here's the thing. Yaesu is struggling, okay, with supply chain. Well, look, if we're not buying super het receivers, the supply chain will probably dry up. And then we're going to be stuck with these radios that in order to get them to work right, we're going to have to spend thousands of dollars, more than what this radio here costs. To get, a Flex radio is going to cost significantly more than this radio you're looking at because Flex has done SDR right. But Yaesu here has this radio, which I'll put it up against any SDR, absolutely any day. And yet, its days are probably numbered because of supply chain issues. Because if the manufacturers aren't selling enough volume of the discrete components required to make this, well, then they're going to move on and make something else. So we got to be really careful about what we're willing to purchase. Don't just purchase based on a sales flyer or a sales pitch. Learn the technology. Watch my videos. I just show you real working conditions and what one radio can do, and compared to another when I have the availability of another radio to do a comparison with. So I'll give you one more example. By the way, Yaesu, the FT857D, great little mobile radio that can also do 2 meters and 70 centimeters. If you've got a vehicle where you got very limited space to mount something, my brother's truck's that way. The only way he was able to have a radio in his truck is the fact that the 857D can go under the seat and its control head can be separately mounted. And he used a gooseneck type thing bolted to the floor, and it just pokes up next to the center console. So he's able to have one radio in there, do it all. Yaesu came out with the FT891, and everybody thought it was going to be the replacement for that 857 with newer technology and a better screen, but it didn't have 2 meters and 70 centimeters. And of course, customers kind of rejected it because Yaesu was asking the same price for the 891 that they did for the 857D. Well, that wound up getting solved by dropping the price. I, in fact, bought two 891s, both of them for less than $600. When they came out, they were $799.95, I believe was the price. So I saved over $200 because people rejected the radio because it didn't have 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Well, then eventually Yaesu did discontinue the 857D, and today, as I speak to you, they have nothing in their product line to replace it. And of course, that's helped ICOM because they've got the 7100, and it fits, it fits that slot. But again, what I was told was it was an issue with supply chain on the 857D. So I just want us to know, in the ham community, we kind of control this by what our purchasing habits are, and if we're going to be suckered into buying something just because it says it's the latest technology, then that's what they're going to build. And we're going to reach a point where the only way to have a really, really fine quality transceiver is we may have to go buy something used. So just be mindful of that. Now, again, I'm not busting the chops of SDRs completely. I haven't played with the non, but the Flex is SDR done right. It's going to cost it. It's going to cost, thousands of dollars. And I think the newest Flex may even be over $6,000. The super hets, though, with a good DSP, just like what you're looking at there, pinnacle to me of radio design, and we don't want to see this go away. I hope Yaesu will continue. They told me at the Hamfest a year and a half ago that they were hoping to continue. Well, they didn't say hope. They said they were going to continue selling the hybrid, the SDR hybrid, which is the FTdx101. They're going to continue going down that lane, and of course now they have the FTdx10, so that seems to be the case. But they said at the same time they're going to continue developing and selling the super heterodyne radios like you're looking at here, and I hope that remains to be the case. But see, they can't know what's going to happen in the supply chain. The companies that are making the discrete components that they need to make these radios. So we can control that with our purchasing habits. So I want to say, if you were thinking of getting an FTdx3000, which I'm just telling you, it's not far behind this 5000. It just doesn't have the simultaneous dual receive, and it's a 100-watt radio instead of 200. But if you want a radio in that class, you better grab one of the last ones that's available. If you were looking to get a 5000, I believe its days are numbered. I just think the writing is on the wall as far as because everybody seems to hang their hat on the SDR technology now. And again, if you're going to go SDR, do it. You got to spend the money to do it right, and that is, it's got to have the upfront filtering. And I believe Yaesu's king of the hill right now. In fact, if you look into Sherwood, if you're into that, the Sherwood engineering specs shootout really for reciprocal mixing dynamic range, RMDR. That's a measure of the selectivity of a radio. Yaesu's FTdx101 is number 1. Flex 6700 number 2, and then the little brother of the Yaesu FTdx101, the FTdx10, is number 3. Now, that's monumental because the FTdx10 doesn't have a variable preselector like the 101 has or the 5000 has, which, for those of you who may be new to the hobby, a lot of radios don't have a variable preselector. They have a bandpass filter. So like here, I'm on the 40-meter band. Well, that means I'm narrowing down the front end of my receiver to where I'm just listening for 40 meters, okay? Again, that's a weakness they have on the SDR side or direct conversion if they don't filter properly. But beyond that, this radio has a feature called VRF, variable RF. It's a button right here that's built in. Now, if you can also put that on steroids by buying an external unit. I've featured it in past videos, so I'm not going to show it, but it's called a mu-tuner, and that just puts that feature on steroids. And it will put this 5000 in at the level of a 101D. Yes, I know, a 101D, but I've done it. tremendous feature. Now, also, the ICOM 7610 has something similar. They call Digisel, D-I-G-I-S-E-L, digital selector. These pre-selectors allow you to narrow down even tighter than the bandwidth and then adjust them where within the band. See the little indicator? You can adjust where within the band you want that pre-selector centered up. And I've shot videos on how to effectively use one, so I won't go into that here. But, you know, these are the kind of things that you get in these what we call contest class radios, meaning that, you know, in contest conditions, you're going to have people all up and down the band, close spacing. People aren't adhering to the 3 kilohertz, ladies and gentlemen, agreement. You know, they'll park right next to your QSO, what have you. So these pre-selectors come in handy for that sort of thing. But the FTdx10 doesn't even have that variable pre-selector in it, and it's still rated number 3 for selectivity. That's how good that little radio is, which is, in all honesty, there may be a supply chain issue. I mean, I'm not going to say that I was lied to by Yaesu. It probably is a supply chain issue that caused the demise here of the FTdx3000. But, yeah, I also kind of made a comment when the FTdx10 hit the street. I said, ooh, that thing's in the price range of a 3000. What's going to happen with the 3000? And it's only been just a month or two now, and here we go. Oh, and by the way, I should mention that 3000 can work with these mu tuners, these external pre-selectors I was talking about. It doesn't have a built-in one, but it can work with the exact same external pre-selectors, the mu tuners. It looks like the micro symbol tune in they're called mu tuning pre-selector. This radio, the 3000, can work with them as well, and it'll put that 3000 on steroids. So just wanted to let you guys know what's going on in the industry. So if you were anticipating the purchase of a 3000 and you didn't know about the discontinuation of it, then you might want to consider pulling the trigger on that. And like I said, no definitive answer from Yaesu about it, but I got to believe that the FTdx5000's days are numbered too. It's probably the last radio to ever have a de-arsenval movement, that meter. It's an actual needle with a spring, which I just think it looks so great. Knobs, the ergonomics of this radio won me over. I like being able to, I'll give you an example. So if I'm working somebody on CW and I'm 20 words a minute, right? So, all right, and then somebody throws a call out, and I forget that I'm at 20 words a minute, and I go back to them, but they're at 13 words per minute, and I start, ooh, well, look in the display right here. See, I got a knob right down here. I can quickly reach that knob, and look, I'm at 13. Power, same thing right here. I can adjust my power. So I like having knobs. I love the ergonomics, the way this radio is laid out. I could do it in my sleep. So those are the kind of things we're going to lose if we don't support this class of radio. And like I said, the 3000 it's more menu driven than the 5000, to be sure, but it does still have knobs in the critical, the most used things. Okay, you see in the image up there along in here across the bottom, those are the main things you'd ever want to touch anyway. All right, so just wanted to throw that out there, folks. A little bit sad news to see an old friend like the 3000 go away. Like I said, I never owned one, but I had a very, very high regard for that radio. And appreciate you watching. Sorry for the somber mood here, just sad news in the radio community, okay? But thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting my channel. Thank you, Patreons, who help make this possible. And, well, this is N4H&H, and I will say 73 to you.